Hello everybody and welcome to Forever Motorsports on this Thursday evening. We are previewing the Bahrain Grand Prix. Formula 1 is finally upon us. Tomorrow, practice session 1 and practice session 2 will start, as well as the Formula 2 and Formula 3, which we will all be covering on Forever Sports, on Forever Motorsports, on Forever Sports, this channel right here. And I'm hoping that we're going to have some people here today to chat about what we expect to see this weekend in the Bahrain Grand Prix. Big thing, of course, Max Verstappen to try and start defending his title from last season. Can he make it 3 in a row? I've got Reece joining me alongside. We're going to discuss all the various things going into the Grand Prix. And yeah, very, very excited to see what happens this weekend. Of course, with all the cars, possible sandbagging in certain teams. And we're going to discuss all the various things going into it. Of course, practice tomorrow is when we will really find out how everything is going, of course. Reece, your thoughts on the weekend coming up? Are you excited?
Yes, for sure. I'm very excited. I mean, this weekend is such a key race for us as Formula One fans to see really how competitive cars and teams are out on track. This will definitely set up, everything for the rest of the season, that's for sure.
So obviously the big news that we need to start with is that of Aston Martin, and the fact that we all thought, and everybody thought, that Felipe Drugovich was going to take Lance Stroll's seat. But in fact, as we can just show here, that is not the case. Lance Stroll will be racing for Aston Martin this weekend.
Yes, he will be racing for Aston Martin this weekend, not being replaced by Felipe Drugovich. He obviously had some surgery on his, I think it was his right wrist, and he feels that he is fit enough to participate in the Bahrain Grand Prix, which is great.
Yeah, as I say, I'm just reading the F1 article here. So saying Aston Martin driver Lance Stroll has spoken to the media for the first time since an incident while out on training on his bike forced him to miss last week's pre-season test session at the Bahrain International Circuit. Of course, we all knew that, and that's why Felipe Drugovich came in and replaced him. And after watching new teammate Fernando Alonso and reserve driver Felipe Drugovich complete the early laps in the AMR 23, a press release issued by Aston Martin on Thursday in Bahrain confirmed Stroll will return to the cockpit for the season opener. So, of course, for Aston Martin, I think that's huge news, of course. That's basically saying, right, we do actually have our two prime drivers taking us straight away from the get-go. We're not having to rely on a reserve driver who's been rushed in last minute to basically take over from Lance Stroll. So, is this a good thing for Aston Martin, or do you think that most fans probably would have wanted to see what Felipe Drugovich could have done?
I think everyone would have been excited to see someone else in the car. Of course, great to have Lance Stroll back in the car. Definitely don't want to see him off the track with any injuries. Obviously, his father owns that team, so he's definitely needed to race and be present, definitely.
I think Stevie P disagrees with you. He's saying it's not great to have Lance Stroll back. I was ready to move to Aston Martin as a fan, I think he means, but now he's back, so not a chance. As I say, unfortunately, the problem with Lance Stroll, a very controversial figure, of course, as you say, his father owns the team, so it is a bit of a very nepotism involved in the Aston Martin team there. So yeah, Lance Stroll is back, much to Stevie P's dismay, but nonetheless, he will be driving, and I think generally for Aston Martin, that's probably a good thing. To be fair to Lance Stroll, actually had started racing quite well last season. He was certainly not out of his depth. I think he started showing some good form in a couple of races, and was really challenging Seb in terms of being a more finishing higher, of course, in each race. So can't be the worst thing. Brett there just saying Merco as fast as my Toyota. Yeah, that's another thing we can certainly talk about, of course, and I will go to those articles now. I just want to finish up on Lance Stroll, but it's also the fact that people still believe Merck are really hiding a lot, because otherwise they're really not looking or shaping up very well for the season as of yet. But we'll certainly get this. Just finishing on Lance Stroll, Reece. He's got a race alongside Alonso. Fernando Alonso, world champion, of course, one of the few world champions on the grid. Your thoughts as to whether or not Fernando Alonso could challenge, maybe even for podium places in this Aston Martin car versus Lance Stroll?
Well, yes, I think Fernando Alonso is definitely going to be able to extract every bit of performance out of that car. We've already seen him performing so well in preseason testing. Obviously, we don't know their fuel levels or what strategies or tests they were doing, but they definitely looked like their car was very planted to the ground and very stable. Obviously, what you want as a racing driver. But I think that Fernando will definitely be able to perform well this season. Obviously, we've seen how he's performed very well in World Endurance Championships, showing that he is still so competitive out there.
Yeah. So yeah, as I said, so moving on from that is Aston Martin. That's obviously the big news going into Bahrain is the fact that we will have all 20 drivers racing tomorrow. All the supposed team drivers, the main drivers for all of the teams as a result of Lance Stroll will be coming back. Just saying in a quote here, it was just some minor surgery on my right wrist and my left one. I banged it up a little bit. It was just pretty, yeah, painful bike accident. Just came off the bike and ate it pretty hard. That's it, and just basically went all out to get myself back into shape, to get back into the car. The doctor was incredible, my physio was unbelievable, and thanks to them, I'm here in Bahrain. So, of course, we will have Lance Stroll racing for Aston Martin tomorrow. And, of course, he did miss the preseason testing, so we're very interested to see how he actually fares in practice session 1. Now, just going to the comments here, just saying, so let's say we go back to Brett's little funny comment with regards to Merc was fast as my Toyota. Yeah, I'm hoping we see Merc certainly improve in practice and throughout the weekend. James there, or Jimmy Boy, saying, fortunately, it looks like another Red Bull season. Stevie P's backing the Ferrari with the GOAT symbol there, love it. Bishop there saying, I need Lando to get that P1 this season. I think that's also a lot of Lando fans will certainly be hoping for Merc. And whilst we obviously talk about Merc, we go to Lando Norris. Let's just bring up an article here with regards to, not Merc, McLaren, sorry, I do apologize. I kept saying Merc there, sorry, McLaren, of course. McLaren saying McLaren to make F1 history at Bahrain, pioneering sponsor tech. So can you just explain quickly what that sponsor tech is?
Yes, so we've obviously seen them testing this out in, I think, last year's season throughout free practices, but it pretty much works like a Kindle where it's like a matte finish LED screen, and it's able to flip throughout sponsors during the race. So they're going to be having that on their car.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and of course, it might well detract from the fact that McLaren need to really get their A into gear this season. We look at that McLaren car, it's a beautiful car, and everything talks about sponsors and the chrome wheels and the chrome sponsors and all these things. But of course, the main thing is to really get themselves going essentially in the season. And just as I say, Lando Norris there is going and saying about McLaren's car, because of course, everybody was talking about the fact that they just do not seem to have any pace whatsoever. And he just went and said, and I quote in this article here that I pulled up, it says, McLaren, not as bad as people are expecting, says Norris. Before the opener, of course. He says in the quote, I don't think we are in a terrible place as it is, said Norris. We are maybe not as strong as we want to be, but we are also not as bad as people are expecting. I don't want to speak too early because at the same time we have to wait and see how we are going to do. So how do you think McLaren are going to do?
Yes, well, I definitely think that they do still have some pace hidden somewhere. I've been saying for the past couple of days, in the past few videos that we've done, it's only been preseason testing. You cannot take what you've seen on those timesheets and go into the season expecting that to be the outcome of the first race. I definitely think there are going to be some outperformers, well, people that we don't expect to have performed so well in these next few days.
Yeah, and Jimmy Boy there saying the real chat is who's going to finish fourth in the constructors. Well, of course, McLaren is, that's what they aim for. The other two teams I would put there personally is Alpine and Aston Martin. And would that be a fair assessment? Who do you think out of those three looks strongest so far? And who do you think going into it could possibly take that best of the rest slot?
Well, I think that Alpine are definitely going to be quite fast. I think Oscar Piastri is going to be kicking himself a little bit. He's gone from a team that's showing to be very competitive this season to possibly a less competitive team. But yes, I think Alpine are definitely going to be best of the rest.
Okay, so you're backing Alpine. I'm actually backing Aston Martin. I think Aston Martin's got something up their sleeves, and I think with such a talented driver in Fernando Alonso, I think that might well be the difference for Aston Martin. So that's who my punt is. I'd love to know in your comments who do you think is going to be the best of the rest to say that fourth constructors position. Say we've named the three teams that we possibly think is. Maybe you guys think it's somebody else completely. Maybe there's a sneaky harsh shout over there. I very much doubt it, but nonetheless, But out of the three that we think it could be between us, Alpine, McLaren, and Aston Martin. So be sure to tell us who.
Well, well, the only reason I haven't said Aston Martin are going to be best of the rest is because I definitely think that they're going to take the fight to the top three teams and possibly even sneak into the top three.
So you're not then backing Mercedes then to be best of the rest, because I think Mercedes out of the top three are not necessarily quite as in form as Ferrari and Red Bull as they want to be. So you're not even backing Mercedes for
Yeah.
fourth.
Well, we'll have to see. There's been a lot of talks of them having a possible B spec car that they may bring into one of the races coming up. So we'll have to see if they do have that and they do decide to take that on. It's definitely going to put them on the back foot.
And of course, just going back to comments here, Rize here saying not as bad as people are expecting. Said every 10-second man ever, just referring to Norris there, of course. So yeah, I mean, it is very much, everyone's saying, oh, it's not as bad as it seems, but no, we keep talking. It's just preseason testing, so we can't take it too seriously. But nonetheless, we do have to wonder going into this race if McLaren don't show up. It's going to be a very long season for Lando Norris. 24, 20, I don't know. Actually, I always
23.
go 23 races, and from the get-go, they're going to be out of it. It's a bit of a shock factor if that should happen.
Yes, for sure. I mean, you definitely would not want to go through a 23 race season without being competitive at all. It would get very frustrating. And I think then he would certainly start looking to Red Bull, who had been pestering him a little bit to sign with them.
Yeah. And James there's just saying, no, it's really talented driver, but really not the most likable character. Can see it really affected Ricardo. So, your thoughts on that? Do you think Lando Norris is a bit of a selfish person? Do you think his character gets called into question?
I don't think he's a bad person. I think it's just he's a racing driver. You have to have some level of grit, and at the end of the day, you can't be defending your teammate. You have to be fast yourself out on track. And unfortunately, if your teammate isn't performing, that's not his problem.
100%. But I think the other part of it, of course, is there's certain things you can say in a press conference that really do mean nothing when it comes to your actual play. And of course, Norris got a lot of backlash for his comments with regards to Ricardo and saying he didn't really care about what was happening with Ricardo, which, if in your mind, is fine. But surely, if you're saying it out to the public, you'd want to sort of just back your teammate a little bit. And the whole point is you're racing for the same team. You know, teammates will need to help each other out every now and then, as you see with Checo and Max Verstappen. Of course, Checo certainly playing a big part, not last season but the season before, in ensuring Max Verstappen got that drivers' championship. So, is it a dangerous thing that Lando would be so bold as to go after his teammate publicly?
Well, you don't necessarily know what goes on behind the scenes. I mean, it's very likely that they did help. Well, that Lando did help out Ricardo a lot behind the scenes in terms of giving him tips for the car setup, um, stuff like that. I mean, you never know what happens.
Yeah. So we will move on from that, unfortunately, but would love to see McLaren, of course, compete a little bit higher up. I think certainly this weekend, McLaren do need to start well if they're going to have a season where fans will be interested in what happens with regards to that team. Reason they're saying Alpine is a good shout for best of the rest. Of course, Ocon there leading from the front. I mean, Ocon last season, he actually really, for me, he really showed what he was actually capable of. I think he's the dark horse for me in this season in terms of driver talent and best driver really to look at each season, each race, because he did some mad maneuvers last season, and I think he's very much slept upon sometimes, Ockham, because I actually really back him as quite a good driver.
Yes, well, he's still quite young, obviously, compared to some of the other drivers, and he has had already his first race win. He's definitely shown that he is very competitive, and he will be one to look out for certain this year.
Yeah. And of course, we do talk about drivers and certain drivers in different situations and for different teams. And of course, one of those drivers that fell out from last season, the likes of Vettel, of course, fell out, but Schumacher, another one. But interesting enough, an article released here saying Schumacher has revealed he's already had interest in his services for a return in 2024. Now, what do you make of that?
I certainly would be excited to see Mick back on the grid.
In the article, I just want to pull it down here just a little bit so people can actually see what's happening. Apologies. There we go. So in the article, it basically says Mick Schumacher will spend the season as the reserve driver for Mercedes, which we already know. But the German already has sights set on getting back into a race seat for 2024. The 23-year-old joined Mercedes in December after spending 2 seasons. We are just looking, saying, however, when looking ahead to a potential return to the grid in 2024, Schumacher expects his achievements in his junior career and in F1 to speak volumes. Speaking at a media session after Mercedes' launch of the new W14 car, Schumacher said, well, there's obviously no guarantee, in brackets, what he means, that I return to the grid in 2024. But I'm in a comfortable position where I feel I can learn and I can extract the maximum amount from this year, even though I'm not driving. But with the results I've shown in the junior categories, but also in F1, I'm sure there will be opportunities over the winter. A few people have already mentioned that there is interest. So in that sense, I'm not too worried. So who do you think those possible people showing interest would be?
Well, I certainly think that Audi would be a contender for one of those teams looking to sign Mick Schumacher. Certainly would be great to have a very famous German name in a very big German manufacturing team, of course. And then another one that's a bit difficult to tell who the second one is.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly interesting. Of course, Schumacher, a very controversial character. I'd love to know the thoughts in the comments as well with regards to him, because a lot of people saying the only reason he's in F1 is because of his daddy's name. That of Michael Schumacher, of course. And others say he definitely got there on his own accord, and he certainly earned his way up. I know which side of the fence you sit on, of course. But if he should get a seat next year, how important is it that he takes advantage of that? Because will that potentially be the last season if he doesn't perform?
Well, for sure, I think he will be, if he does get brought back in, he might get signed on a single-year contract, just to show that he actually can drive a race car and not crash as much as he did in Haas. Unfortunately, I think that the Haas that he did get given was quite a unstable car and quite difficult to drive. As a rookie, that's not necessarily what you want, but he could have maybe performed a bit better in certain situations. As a person, he's obviously very likable, and any team would want to sign him.
I mean, there's a huge media personality, of course. So if you want to get good traction for your team, having Mick Schumacher in your team is a brilliant way to do that. Arguably one of the most famous drivers on the grid outside of the main competitors right at the top. So certainly an interesting character, and I'd love to see him back in Formula One. I think he was very harsh last season. Some of the hate that he was getting, because he certainly showed in a lot of races his potential and his ability, of course, in that pass, which was very much out of its league with regards to most of the cars on the grid. A couple of races, he was really pushing some much higher tier cars and really showing drivers what was what and what. So I'd certainly like to see Mick come back next season, and maybe we'll hopefully see him a little bit this season as reserve driver for Mercedes. Perhaps maybe something small happens to George Russell or Lewis Hamilton, but of course we don't wish ill upon them. But he might well just go and take their place, or that even of McLaren. Of course, he is a reserve driver for McLaren alongside Mercedes. So we'll certainly be interested to see. Just saying here, new Jimmy Way saying Mick earned his way, definitely held his own, just needs to sort out his crashes when he pushes too hard. Pretty much what you're saying as well. Richard there just adding a little, I love the little comment there saying nothing can beat the good old Suzuki Swift in the shout for best of the rest. So yeah, Suzuki Swift, I love it. And I'm going to be very controversial to say, of course, that's with regards to Yuki Tsunoda in that AlphaTauri car. I'm sure we'll see that that car try and push. Lots of drivers have got to prove things this weekend. Of course, teams will be letting their secrets be known to the world. Sandbagging cannot be a thing anymore. So we'll certainly be interested to see what happens. Bishop also saying here, lots of current drivers have had a helping hand to become an F1 driver. In the end, they did earn the right to be there. And I think that's exactly spot on. Lots of family connections, and a lot of these teams, a lot of help with money, of course. Money basically puts you into Formula One more than anything else. And Michael Schumacher allowed his son to get through based on his name and his profits, of course. But Mick Schumacher does have those genes in him. So certainly did get there on his own accord, I think, at least. Yeah. So, what are you most excited to see this weekend?
Well, I'm just excited to see the cars back out on track, driving competitively, of course. It's been a long winter break. Obviously, it's been one of the shorter ones, but it always feels very long when we don't have cars out on track.
I mean, yeah, it's for a lot of Formula One fans. They've been dying for this moment, and of course, we've got a really long season ahead of us. So finally, going to get some great action, of course. And as I say, we talk about Mick Schumacher, but the likes of Daniel Ricciardo will also be on the grid, of course. So we will still see those smiles from all those people, and a lot of similar faces will be seen on the grid. I'm sure we'll see a lot of Sebastian Vettel as well. I'm sure they'll use him as a pundit, and we'll see a lot of those drivers around, and I'm sure that will make all of us fans as happy as anything. So just a little bit of trivia here. Well, not necessarily trivia, but just some sort of information for people. You know, we look at the opening race and we look at times different teams have won the opening race now in Formula One history. So the number one by a little fair distance is Ferrari. Ferrari have won 16 opening race, or with 16 times the team was the winning team on the day. Could they possibly make that 17 this weekend, or will it be a Red Bull weekend?
Yes, that is what we need to see. And for sure, I will be watching very closely through each of the practices this weekend to see who I am going to obviously predict will take the pole on Saturday.
No, don't use the weekend to predict. Predict now. I want to know. I want to know the information. Will Ferrari beat Red Bull this weekend, or will Red Bull remain victorious? Or will both crash out and Aston Martin take it? Because I actually back Aston Martin ahead of Mercedes this weekend.
Well, I certainly think Red Bull will be bringing their A game this weekend.
No
I'm going to
crashes.
say Red Bull. No,
No crashes. No faults.
I don't think so.
I've brought you into some bold decisions here. So you see, I've forced your hand. So quite interesting, actually, of course. 16 times Ferrari has won the opening weekend. 13 times McLaren. So I don't think we're going to see that. But 7 times Mercedes, 6 times Williams, 5 times Lotus, 4 BRM or Cooper, 3 times Renault, 2 Alfa Romeo, Benetton, Brabham or Maserati, and 1 times Braun GP, Ligier, Lotus, Matra, Red Bull, Tyrrell, and Wolf. Red Bull have only won one opening weekend in Formula One. I think that's quite an interesting thing.
Not a bad thing, to be very honest.
But it's interesting though, because
there's also a statistic that says if you win the first race of the season, you're less likely to win the drivers or constructors championships.
Well, what do you think of the comments, people? Do you think that's a sound piece of logic to go by? It's not exactly bad. You know, we saw it with Red Bull.
For the past 9 years, it's been the statistic. It hasn't. Yeah.
So will we make it 10? Will we make it 10? That's of course the very interesting thing. We'll only be able to tell at the end of the season, of course. But you know, Red Bull only winning one of the opening weekends, and you reckoning they're going to win this weekend, which is of course a bold call. Yeah.
Well, I do have some more stats here. The winner of the first race of the season has gone on to win win that year's title on 34 occasions, but it has only happened twice in the last 11 years.
So really not a normal thing anymore in these new cars. So people in the comments, as I say, tell me who's winning this weekend. Come on, who's and drivers. I mean, is Charles Leclerc going to finally get a decent start? Is he going to be in his A game in that Ferrari? You know, is that Mercedes going to be something to a force to be reckoned with? There's lots of things we can talk about, of course. And interestingly enough, and I will show it quickly. I just want to load it up, and I do apologize. It's going to take a little bit of time here to load it up. But today, of course, the opening titles for Formula One were released. And I thought there was one really interesting thing that took place in that opening titles, and that is the placement. Because, I mean, they basically, when they do these opening titles, they go through all the drivers, of course, from all the different teams, and they pretty much place them in terms of where they rank on the grid and in terms of fame. So the last one, of course, being Max Verstappen, he was last year's winner, so he takes that spot there. I mean, you can tell me if I'm wrong. I've just thought about it now. Did they place all those drivers based on where they ranked last year in terms of driver standings, or was it? Do you know? Because I was just thought about it now.
Don't really know. I didn't. Yeah, I didn't compare.
Because the only reason I say that is
Search it quickly.
because the only reason I say that is because Lewis Hamilton was quite well before the end. You know, they had George Russell came after Lewis Hamilton, which was for me quite interesting. Apologize for that. You just heard a little bit there, but so we will play it for you quickly. I'm just going to pull it across here. So enjoy these opening titles. As you can see what the opening titles are for the weekend, and you're going to see this tomorrow for the first time for the season. So cannot wait to get going. Just going to play it quickly for 48 seconds. Here we go.
I've just looked at it. It is in the order of their finishing positions last year.
So isn't that a bit of an
Drivers' Championship?
Bit of an insult to Lewis, then, isn't it? Just sort of shows how good he did last season.
Unfortunately, that's how it's done.
I know. So, of course, interesting there. 2 Red Bull and 2 Ferrari drivers in that top 4 last year, in the last season, of course. Will we see the same thing this year? Good question. I would love to know. People, we're going to wrap up. Thank you so much for watching this preview for the Bahrain Grand Prix 2023. Practice sessions will be underway tomorrow. We will be streaming the entire weekend, so be sure to stay on the channel. We will, of course, cover as much as possible. Reece, any final words you want to say about Bahrain? Predictions, etc.?
Not too much to add. Just I'm very excited to get back underway in Bahrain under the lights. It's definitely going to be very exciting, and we hope to see you all there with us.
Perfect. Thank you guys so much for watching Forever Motorsports on Forever Sports. We will, of course, see you again very shortly. Until then, take care. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday evening, and goodbye. Cool.